during the Civil Rights Movement. We still had mass discrimination, obviously, against African Americans. African Americans were targeted. There were still lynchings going on. They were towards the end of lynching, but there were still lynchings going on. We still had issues in terms of African Americans being able to vote. 68 was right after this, where African Americans were, basically given the right to vote. We still had some issues concerning exercising that vote. So you still have mass discrimination, racism, and discrimination against African Americans. Also, during this time in the 60s, you had the bombing of African American churches. And so again, these laws were put into effect to try to alleviate those types of behavior and to obviously criminalize it. 1968, that law also, as I said, made it illegal to interfere with individuals in terms of their housing. In the 60s as well, you had the bombing of not only churches, but also if someone wanted to move in, African American moving into a quote unquote white neighborhood, they would be the subject of harassment. In the South, you had the Ku Klux Klan burning crosses on their lawns, but there would be bombs thrown into their homes. There would be things painted on their garage doors, on the doors, etc. Which, by the way, goes on today in some sections of the United States as well. 2009, we had the Congress pass. I'm sorry, let me back up. 1988, also, we had the Church Arson Prevention Act, which I mentioned before. We had numerous bombings of African American churches in the South and also in the North as well. In 2009, Congress passed and President Obama signed the Matthew Shepard and the James Byrd Jr. Hate Crimes Prevention Acts. As some of you may be aware, Matthew Shepard was an individual who was a homosexual, and he was killed based upon the fact that he was a homosexual. And so these laws went into effect in order to deal with crimes based on gender, as gender identity, as well as sexual orientation. Again, return to today, we have numerous crimes against individuals who are transgender. There have been a number of assaults and murders of individuals who are transgender. Now, the states, many of the states have hate crime laws, and many do not. So several states do not have comprehensive hate crime laws. The large states, excuse me, Georgia, Indiana, Utah, Wyoming, those states do not have hate crime laws whatsoever. And I'll get to that in a second. When you talk about a hate crime law, and New York does, New Jersey does, so here in the tri-state area, we do have these laws. When you talk about a hate crime, it's not like it's on the book, oh, this is a hate crime, murder, arson, rape. That's not what we're talking about. What we're talking about, for the most part, and in most states, including New York, is that if you commit an assault, for example, and the object of that assault, the victim of that assault, the reason you've assaulted that individual is because of their race, because of their gender, because of their sexual orientation, because of their religion. If the reason that you are assaulting them is one of those listed, then that becomes a hate crime. And here in New York, it would be assault as a hate crime. And what that means here in New York is that you would be subject to greater enhanced punishment. So if you assault someone, perhaps it's going to be 3 years, but the reason you assaulted that person was because of their race, because of their gender, because of their sexual orientation, it's probably going to be 4 to 5 years. So it has to be proven that the reason that you've assaulted that person, again, the reason you assaulted them was because of their race, because of their sexual orientation, because of their gender. And we're not only talking about individuals. Again, if you set a church on fire, a synagogue on fire, the reason that you're setting that synagogue, or the reason that you're setting the church on fire is religion based. You're doing so because of some hatred or bias, obviously, towards Jews or towards Christians, towards Catholics, and so that does not mean that in those states which do not have hate crimes, that the crime will not be prosecuted. The crime will be prosecuted, but the crime will be prosecuted just like any other assault or any other murder or any other arson. Those states who don't have hate crimes, it's very interesting. Many of them talk about freedom of speech. And the reason they talk about freedom of speech, so for example, if you walk up to someone who is African American, or you walk up to someone who is Asian American, and you call them by some type of derogatory name, that in those other states would not necessarily mean that it's a hate crime. And those states say, well, you know what, you have a right to call that person by that name. And wherein that person may find it to be a derogatory term, and you and I would most probably find it to be a derogatory term, those states say, well, you know what, they have a constitutional right. The person has a constitutional right to call that other person by that name. Here in New York, if you do call someone by a derogatory name, etc., you still have to prove that that was the reason that you then went forward and you assaulted that individual. New Jersey, same laws as, basically the same laws as in New York, where you assault someone or you commit some crime against that person, and it's based upon their race, based upon their religion, sexual orientation, ethnicity, etc. Also, intimidation. If you intimidate individuals, again, based upon one of the factors listed, that would also include a hate crime. So as I stated, most of the states do have some type of hate crime legislation. The legislation normally is going to be that it will be somewhat enhanced. One of the interesting cases recently here in New York was People v. Marjoni. In this particular case, an individual was found guilty for writing the words, the N-word, F-U-C-K, as well as P-U-S-S-I, on the walls of a female bathroom with a black marker in a school. And that was considered to be a hate crime. That was considered to be a hate crime against females because it was in a female bathroom. The court said that the reason that this occurred was obviously because they were targeting females. And also the court specifically stated that there is no constitutional right, no freedom of speech, which would be protected by engaging in that type of conduct. Another case in New York also, defendant was a Caucasian male, hurled numerous racial slurs towards an African-American victim prior to shooting that African-American victim in the abdomen. The court held that that was attempted murder as a hate crime, assault also as a hate crime, and found that there was proof that the defendant assaulted this individual, attempted to kill this person, really, based solely upon the fact that the individual was African American. So now with COVID-19, as Ms. Johnson mentioned, and other presenters will talk about as well, now we have issues in terms of crimes against Asian Americans. We have crimes against Asian Americans. We have crimes against members of the Jewish community as well. As Ms. Johnson mentioned, there have been a couple of cases directed towards members of the Jewish community as well. You may recall in the news there was a individual who had, I believe, gone to some type of function in Rockland County, and they believed that he had, there was a cluster in Rockland County. There was also believed to have been some type of cluster in in Brooklyn as well. And so that was thought to be the quote-unquote fault of these Jewish individuals, and therefore we started, there was an influx of cases against members of the Jewish community. I'll get on to the incidents. As I said, there have been those incidents against Asian Americans. There have also been the incidents against members of the Jewish community as well. The New York City Commission on Human Rights has instituted a program in conjunction with the mayor's office so that individuals will report, encouraging individuals to report any incidents of hate crimes as a result of COVID-19. There was actually a town hall, virtual town hall, which was held on April 30th. Members of the New York City Commission on Human Rights, as well as the Mayor's Commission, attended. Also, I think all of the offices of the district attorney, so that'd be Bronx, Manhattan, Brooklyn, and Queens. I'm not sure about Staten Island, but they all have a separate bureau or unit within the office that deals specifically with hate crimes and are dealing now specifically with COVID-19 complaints relating to hate crimes. Now, what they are stating is that you should report it. You should call 311. If it is occurring now, presently in front of you, so you see someone who, an Asian American, African American, what have you, who is being assaulted or is being, there's some criminal activity against that individual or a group based upon COVID-19. If it's happening in front of you, then they are asking that you call 911 and that you report it. Ronald Lauder has an online portal to report coronavirus hate crimes. The website is listed in one of the slides, and we'll certainly make that available to you. It is important that there be a record of exactly what is going on, and that there be a record of these types of assaults and these types of these types of behavior, that we have a record of them. Unfortunately, what we're finding is that they are being underreported. Individuals are simply kind of walking away and not doing anything about it. The video that we attempted to show a little while ago showed, someone was videotaping that, so that's why we have a record of that. Question is, how is the distinction or proof derived? Are they solely witness-based? Yeah, that is in general what is occurring. So they're going to be witness-based. Obviously, if there's a witness to it, or you are a witness to it, or someone else is a witness to it, obviously that's going to be easier to prove. Otherwise, many times it's going to be your word against their word. But yeah, it's going to be, the distinction is going to be pretty much proof derived. We have other resources. The New York State has what's called an anti-hate crime resource guide, which I don't know how helpful that is. Do we really need a guide to tell you how not to hate? But anyhow, they do have that. As I said, the district attorney's offices, the AG's offices as well, they as well have units dealing with this. Morris County, they have a special, Morris County is in New Jersey. They have a special website, which again is in the slides, where you would go, where you would lodge any complaints or any instances of hate crimes, of bias crimes. And they talk about, again, if you find that you are the victim of these types of crimes based upon your black, they say they have black, based upon your religion, based upon your ethnicity, based upon your sexual orientation, LGBTQ, Asian American, etc., that you should report this to them. And they have a website also with Morris County. in terms of reporting it. And this is actually very recent. In April, again, NYPD was encouraging people to call 911 to report any bias crimes, again with COVID-19. They actually tweeted this, and NYPD tweeted this and stated that they are continuing to arrest individuals who are responsible for COVID-19, Asian-based hate crime, and hold them accountable. I was not able to see the number of actual prosecutions. The number that I was able to find was 15 in terms of arrests in New York County. I wasn't able to find the numbers in the other counties, but in New York County, there were 13 actual arrests for COVID-19 related bias, assaults, etc. Of the 13, 9 were against Asian Americans, and the 2 were against individuals who we believe to be Jewish, and then the remaining was unknown. But the majority were against Asian Americans. Those cases, there were arrests. They're pending the prosecution by the District Attorney's Office here in New York County. So, thank you.
Thank you, Judge Weber. Judge Weber, before you conclude, can we just go back to the slide where you indicated Georgia does not have a hate crimes law, the state of Georgia, and just talk for a minute about the situation where if the state does not have a hate crimes law, they can still be prosecuted under the federal law. And we know that this recent case of Ahmaud Arbery, wherein 2 citizens of Georgia made allegedly tried to make a citizen's arrest and shot Ahmaud Arbery. There have been, various issues concerning prosecution. It took quite some time for that to take place. Now there is an arrest, charges are being made, and consideration of bringing a hate crimes charge under the federal law is being considered, since Georgia does not have a state hate crimes law.
Yeah, that's the extra question, Ms. Johnson. I cannot comment on a pending case, even though the pending case is not in New York. I can't comment on pending case, but your point is well taken. Although a state does not have its own hate crimes law, the feds can come in and take it. It becomes very political, however, and then the question becomes whether or not the federal prosecutors will step in and actually take it and actually take over the prosecution. So it does become political. So you do have to look to who that federal prosecutor is, to that particular federal prosecutor's office, to see what their political leanings may or may not be, and then whether or not they will then come in and actually take over the prosecution. So you do have an issue, as usual, where you're talking about the federal prosecutors versus the state prosecutors, and whether you want to step on toes or exactly how you want to proceed. But yes, most definitely, if the individual state does not have a hate crimes law, and here in Georgia that you're talking about, they do not have one, the federal government could come in, federal prosecutors could go in and take over that prosecution.
Okay, thank you so much. It's excellent. All right, moving on to our next panelist, Chris Kwok.
Hi, everybody.
Okay, Chris, after a stellar 15-year career at the New York District Office of the United States Equal Employment Opportunity Commission, where he mediated hundreds of employment disputes, Chris continued his career with the premier mediation arbitration firm, JAMS. The great work that he does in his day job as a mediator arbitrator serves him very well as a leader and activist in the Asian community. Chris?
Yeah, thank you so much for that introduction. Those are very kind words, and thank you for this opportunity to speak to the audience. I'm sure that on a Friday afternoon, an audience like this is going to be very engaged and interesting in the topic. So I'm going to talk about a little bit about the history, and Nadine actually, did a really great job in the beginning talking about, who gets associated with disease and why. And I think that's really at sort of the heart of what I want to talk about. And if you see the first slide, it's called Asians, Disease, and Scapegoating. I'm not Jack Chin. That's my friend from UC Davis School of Law. He's allowed me to use the slides. He's giving me permission, and I wanted to leave his name up there. So if you could sort of flip through the slides, Chinese immigration and the entry of Chinese people to America in large numbers began in the mid-1800s and really accelerated after the end of slavery. So actually, African Americans and Chinese Americans, their histories in this country are intimately interlinked, because with the end of slavery, which we all, of course, support and applauded, there was a great need for labor in America. And one of the places that they found supplied labor in that period was China. China was going through hard times economically in that era, and people, young men in particular, were being shipped around the world, not as slaves, but as essentially indentured servants. So they went around the world, not only to America, but to South America, to the Caribbean. And when they entered America, it challenged America's sense of itself again. As we know, racism has been an ongoing issue. It's been central to sort of the American story in one way or another since the beginning. And if you flip through the slides, if you could look at the slide, there's three ghosts sort of coming out of San Francisco Harbor. I don't know if you can see that. One of them is leprosy, and in the left hand of that ghost is Chinatown. Because a lot of people did associate in that period sickness with the Chinese immigrants and laborers that were there. Let's see. So in 1900, there was a bubonic plague outbreak in San Francisco, and immediately the blame fell on the Chinese. They go, oh, the Chinese are here, it must be in Chinatown. So what they did was they closed down Chinatown, and they forced both the Chinese and Japanese people that were living in San Francisco, Chinatown, or the area to take a experimental vaccine. And they quarantined all Asians in neighborhoods. They didn't do it by neighborhood, because if you're a white family in that area, they would just draw the quarantine line around you, because they kind of essentially saw sort of whites as not carriers of the disease. But if you were Chinese or Japanese or Asian, then you were. And I think it doesn't surprise maybe some of you, or maybe it does surprise you to hear that these ideas have been long present in sort of the ether of American society. And so there was a lawsuit about this, and maybe to for us as lawyers, the lawsuit was eventually successful for the Chinese. It was found to be an illegal plan, because there was zero evidence that the bubonic plague outbreak was the fault of the Chinese laborers. It was actually, of course, as they found out, the fault of rats. That's the rats that sort of transmitted the disease. So I wanted to give you just that sort of a little bit of background, a little sort of unknown history, that this kind of sort of essentialization of people and a disease is not new to a racialized society. I want to encourage everyone to oppose that type of essentialization. Many Asians are now seen as carriers of the disease, I think. They're perceived to be carriers of the disease no matter whether they're sick or not, or they're carriers or not. And that type of essentialization is something we really need to not believe, not act on. And if we see it being acted on, we should really do our best to stop that, or take video. As we said, that might be the best thing. So just wanted to thank you. I think that Honorable Doris Lynn Cohen, who graciously invited me, is going to take over the rest of my time, but just wanted to share that history with you and to encourage everyone to stand against it. Thank you.
Thank you, Chris. Chris, before you conclude, could you talk a little bit? Okay, I'm getting feedback. Sure.
I hear you.
Can you talk a little bit about the history of mask wearing in Asian communities?
Yeah.
I was reading something very fascinating about it recently, and how it's not normally been tied to disease per se.
That's right. I mean, it's just tied to a sense of community. Let's say so. It started in actually Japan, right? In the modern era, Japanese people during the flu season would wear a mask, and you might be sick. You might wear the mask because you were sick, but you also might wear the mask just to protect yourself from other people's sickness. And that became sort of prevalent in Asia during flu season, right? And during these pandemic outbreaks, as soon as people sort of dealt with the outbreak of COVID-19, people all across Asia started wearing masks. And it was just a sort of way to show concern out of a community, sort of like concern for others. And then a lot of Asians in America, because they have relationships with people in Asia or came from there recently or came from there, they have family members there, they started wearing masks. And before it became sort of an order in America, I'll tell you, many Asian Americans and myself were fearful of wearing masks outside, because we felt that if we wore a mask, we were telling people in America, I'm sick, and then we would become a target of like harassment or violence. And so it became sort of a complicated sort of like, issue. And now everyone's ordered to wear a mask. So I guess I could safely wear a mask and not worried about being targeted just for wearing a mask. But I'd be honest with you, as an Asian American, and my wife feels the same way, we feel targeted and fearful for our physical safety in a way that we never had to deal with, not like African Americans had to deal with for centuries, quite honestly. Like Ahmad going for a jog. Like, why is going for a jog dangerous to your health in this country? And of course, it's a terrible history of racial injustice. Asian Americans are part of that. They experience racial injustice. It's a different intensity. There's no question. But at the same time, there's no question that Asian Americans have had a long history of discrimination and racism. But of course, it's slightly different. But if you go back, if you draw the picture big enough, it's all the same thing. It's all about who's in power and who gets to decide. And like 2009, we had the pig flu. Where did that originate? It originated in America. Mm-hmm. No one ever thought to say, this is the American flu, that somehow white people, because they love eating pigs, man, that's the American flu. And so I think that is just to sort of, remind people, yes, the virus was identified in Wuhan, China, and there's probably good criticism of the Chinese government that we need to engage in, but we need to separate the Chinese government from the Chinese people, and we need to separate essentializing people, saying this people is that. This people is dirty, these people are disease carriers. That's the sort of thing we want to get away from. So,
right. Yeah, thank you for that, Chris. And in talking about the Asian Americans and Black history experience, the Black Civil Rights Movement experience, there are many wonderful, great Asian American icons, such as Grace Lee Boggs. She was an activist, civil rights icon, and her vision challenged us to imagine and create a better world.
That's
right. She was the daughter of Chinese immigrants. She worked with Martin Luther King Jr. She lived to be 100 years old, and she never wavered in her commitment to the labor movement, the civil rights movement, and the Black Power movements.
She was a New Yorker. She was a New Yorker, and she moved to Detroit and met her husband there because she thought it's labor, it's the center of the action. And, people don't remember these stories, Nadine. And so we need to remind people that there are existing people, and remind people of the existing connections. Asian Americans have benefited from the civil rights movement in 100 different ways that I can't even begin to count. And I talk about that all the time. And Asians face discrimination, but we also perpetrate it. So we need to be aware. And I think that's the message that we definitely want to take out of this, because you look at how it's falling on African Americans in terms of the health outcomes, in terms of, all those wearing a mask becomes problematic for African American males, and we need to be on the lookout. We need to deal with those things at the same time as we talk about anti-Asian harassment and violence, which has become, I think, a revived issue, unfortunately. Yeah.
Yes, thank you. Okay, so now our next presenter, Justice Lynn Cohan, has blazed trails in a number of areas. She serves on the New York State Supreme Court Appellate Term First Department. She is the first woman of Asian descent to be elected to the Supreme Court, and she is subsequently the first Asian woman to be appointed to an appellate panel. So with that, before Justice Lee Cohan speaks, I think we have another video. Mary, could you cue up that video? Okay, if you see the link to the video, you must link the video individually. Please, everyone, click on the link to that video so that you all will see it at the same time. And I believe that video is approximately 3 minutes or so. Thank you. For those of you who can't find the link to the video, please look in the chat area. The link is in the chat area. Thank you. Video number 2, the link is in the chat area. Have you all viewed the video? Okay. All right. So now we will hear from Justice Doris Lynn Cohen. Justice Cohen?
Okay, you can hear me now?
Yes, we can hear you now. Thank you.
I'm on a computer and a phone because I'm having trouble connecting. So good afternoon, everyone. Sorry for the technical difficulties. I am so happy to be here. I'm so happy you folks from Council for Unity are here and the other high school students as well. So I wear two hats. I'm a commissioner of the Franklin H. Williams Commission, so I know the important work that they're doing. I thank my colleagues for organizing this and fellow presenters for being part of this. And I'm also a member of Council for Unity. So I know how much you as students, as Council for Unity members, are really a force for change and good in the world and in your school and your communities. And I know that you try to bring people together in your schools, in your communities. And I know that you folks are certainly caring individuals and you want to do good in the world. And I thought that it was important to present this topic to you because this is about racism. This is about injustice. And I know that the whole concern of Council for Unity is to bring people together. And you've been presented with a lot of important information. We will be presenting you with even more information as we go on. But I wanted you to think about instances in which you face discrimination. And we are going to open it up to dialogue so that you can also tell us instances where you face similar hate crimes or some sort of harassment and how you felt in that instance and whether you identified with any of the people on the video you just saw. So we want to hear from you and we also want to hear your ideas. You've been given some ideas, you know, the case, I can't comment on an active case either, but some of the cases came to light because some people who were not part of the incident took videos. And so, or they figured out a way of intervening without in safety. So that's something that the Human Rights Commission, the City Human Rights Commission has done trainings on, and maybe in the future we can actually present somebody from the Human Rights Commission to talk to Council for Unity members and other high school students about that, because that's an important thing. You are really a force for good. I know that you are, and I know that that Kyle and your teachers and Bob DeSena, who we send our love to, and hope he gets better soon. That's what you folks talk about all the time. And I was at the induction lunch, and I saw the oath that you folks took to basically empower yourself and your communities, and I think that's so important. I know sometimes people talk down to you, and I know that you folks have such great ideas. I hosted a bunch of Council for Unity kids at our courthouse. Maybe some of you were there, and I know that how intelligent you folks were, the questions that you asked, the interests that you have in society, in law, and I know that you folks all can be a force for good. I just wanted to touch on something that Nadine had asked about and want to present a fuller picture for so that you get perhaps a different perspective. So, we talked about that there are actual hate crimes on the books. But there are also other laws on the books that a person can be charged with. So even if there's not a hate crime law in the book, the person can still be charged for, say, assault or for murder or something like that, or harassment. So even though there's no special hate crimes that the person can be charged, hate crime law that the person can be charged, they still can be charged with the underlying crime. So just so to be clear, it's not that they're getting away scot-free, it's just that perhaps that extra enhancement, that extra charge cannot be placed for whatever reason. And so it's still important to make sure that if you witness a crime, to call 911. At the time. So I encourage people to do that. If you can take video safely, that's another way of also making sure that you are a force for good. And if you hear harassment, say on social media or discrimination, you can be a force for good. Sometimes it takes that one person and other people will chime in and say, that's just not cool. That's really, why are you saying something about so-and-so like that? And what Chris had talked about in terms of, demonizing whole groups of people, that happens to so many groups. So we can be a force for good and say, hey, that's just not acceptable. And I think that if enough of us do that, we can be that change. And it's important to really understand that sometimes when people need an explanation or need someone to blame because they don't understand something or they don't want to take responsibility, that happens too. It's easy to blame something. So, for example, the bubonic plague was blamed on Asians, and so the various illnesses or viruses are blamed on other people, like the Spanish flu. The Spanish flu was actually in America, and it was the Spanish folks who actually reported about it, the media, and it became the Spanish flu. So it's the Spanish people. So it's so easy to kind of demonize people. And what Council for Unity is all about, as you know, is that we are all individuals, we are all humans, and we all connect. And that's something that we have to always keep in mind because we want this world to be a better place. And you folks can be that force to make this world a better place. So I think I've spoken enough. I want to really thank everybody, especially the students who've joined us, because it means that you're caring, that you're people who really want to make the world better and will be making the world better, because I believe in every single one of you. I've met so many Council for Unity members, and I know that you all have it in you to make this world a better place, and you are every day. So I know this is tough times for everybody, but hang in there. Kyle, I know, is such a cheerleader and really rounding up people and making sure that people are connected. And don't be don't be, shy about reaching out. We will be doing more of these forums, hopefully in the future. We did one in the courthouse. We're going to hopefully do one talking about people's careers and things that folks face in going up the career ladder. And so I want to thank you very much, and I'll turn it back to Nadine. And I think we're going to be opening up for comments and questions.
Well, thank
And I
you so much,
encourage
Judge.
you to talk about that. Okay.
Thank you so much, Judge Lynn Cohan. Before we do that, we have one more panelist, speaker, Lashaya Costello is a program site coordinator for Council for Unity, and she is an alumnus of the program as well. In 2007, Ms. Costello was a part of the first Council for Unity chapter in her Bronx high school, formerly known as Leadership Institute. So Lashaya is going to tell you a little bit about herself, her journey, and perhaps make some commentary on the program so far. Thank you so much, Lashaya.
Hello, hi. Hello, good evening, everyone.
Good evening.
So my name is Lashaya Costello. I'm an alumni for Council for Unity from back in 2007 in my high school. So Council for Unity, the journey, I have my ups and downs while being a student. It gave me the opportunity to, have another way of getting out my situation at that time. I was, that student who always fight, always into trouble and things like that. Kind of somewhat hung out with the wrong crowd, but it gave me another outlook as far as having other opportunities, and basically to make myself a better person. I decided to, stick around. My site coordinator was actually Kyle Harmon. So, shout out to him because he helped me a lot through that process. I put myself through college. I attended BMCC for my associate's degree in criminal justice, and I decided that I wanted to take my studies further. So now I currently am in a master's program in John Jay for criminal justice, as well as working for Council for Unity. Working with Council for Unity now, it just helps me as well as help the students as far as, letting them know that they always have someone to be there, that they don't have, just because they may be in a situation now, that they don't always have to be there. There's other alternatives, to make things better for themselves. And I'm just always there for the support, and everyone just know how to contact me. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Lashaya. All right, before we get to the next section, which we've heard about some solutions early on. Justice Troy Weber and Justice Doris Lynn Cohan mentioned about calling 311 and 911, but there are other resources and solutions that we can talk about. But before we get to that, there's another video to put you in the mood, and if you need to get a sip of water or anything like that, this will give you a chance to do that. And so all of our panelists will join in the next session in talking about resources and solutions. Thank you. The link is provided in the chat for our third video. And this video is just the other day, it was Stevie Wonder's birthday. So this video incorporates a song along with some graphics and some photos, which ties very nicely in with our theme of this evening's program. Thank you. So, Love's in Need of Love Today. It's a Stevie Wonder song. I hope some of you are fans of Stevie Wonder. For evil to flourish, it only requires good men to do nothing. Technology without hatred can be a blessing. Technology with hatred is always a disaster. That's a quote by Simon Wiesenthal. He was a Holocaust survivor and a human rights activist. Injustice anywhere is a threat to justice everywhere. Darkness cannot drive out darkness. Only light can do that. Hate cannot drive out hate. Only love can do that. Those were quotes by Martin Luther King Jr. So let's talk about solutions, other solutions. You'll see the panel on your screen. There are some resources and solutions, 10 ways to fight hate from the Southern Poverty Law Center. So let's start with Lashaya. Lashaya, let's chime in and talk about some solutions that you may have dealt with in your experience that you think might be applicable to the situation that we're talking about. Okay, Lashaya is coming up.
Lashaya Chidata, she just messaged me. She may be on an important call.
Okay, so Kyle, I'm going to defer to you now. All right,
Sure.
so let's chime in. Number one, do something.
Okay. So I guess in speaking, I guess on behalf of council, and I would like to welcome, if you will, Mr. Jacobs, our Spark Counselor at Forest Hills, Ms. Sanchez, who's an assistant principal, and Mr. Cookmeister, who's also an advisor, because they're kind of my example. One of my favorite quotes from Bob DeSena, our founder, is that when you bring everyone together, there's no one left to fight. So while we're working hard to bring the kids together and help them understand that their differences aren't as different as they think they are, you have administrators who become a part of that network of change. And I think that's what really makes things effective, when you become an actual community, bringing back the concept of having a community, the community working together for that cause of promoting unity and changing hatred.
Okay, great. And thank you and welcome. So number two, join forces, which I mentioned one Asian American previously, Lee Boggs. Yuri Kochiyama is another. She's a Japanese American civil rights activist who started her civil rights journey in Harlem during the 1960s. She founded a group called Asians Americans for Action, which sought to build political movement tied to the struggle for Black liberation. The friendship and political alliance that she had with Malcolm X virtually changed her life. So, number two, join forces. Judge Troy Weber, please chime in.
Well, as I stated, there are numerous websites. There are 311, 911 in terms of reporting these types of crimes, these types of behavior. And as Judge Lynn Cohen stated, if you're on social media and you see something that is going on, you should actually report it and or say something about it. I think it's important that you take a stand. I recognize that it's not easy, but I think it's important that you do so.
Yes, absolutely. All right. So Judge Lynn Cohen, support the victims. How do we do that?
So many times I think people blame the victim. And it's funny because I just had an interchange with somebody really on social media who was immediately, oh, why was that person walking in the street at that hour? It's like, you know what? People do that because maybe, they were going to pick up their child. Maybe they had just come off from work. It's not the person's fault. So encouraging the victim to report the crime is very important, saying that it's important to report the crime. And some people say, oh, the police won't do anything. Well, certainly the police won't do anything if nobody reports a crime. So the first thing is to actively report the crime and to ensure that it's reported also as a hate crime, to make the case that it's a hate crime. And you can support the victim by going with them to the police, by calling 911 with them, whatever it is. And don't ever blame the victim. It's never the victim's fault. It's not because they were in the wrong place. It's not because they wore the wrong thing. It's not anything like that. So that's an important piece to it. And throughout, the person may be very upset. Sometimes may even lash out at you. Try to be understanding, be kind. And that's a very important piece to it. And if you see on social media somebody saying, oh, that person asked for it, nobody asks to be a victim of crime. It's just not possible. Nobody puts a sign on their forehead, says, okay, beat me up today. They are a victim. And they need to be a survivor, and you can help them be a survivor by supporting them, by encouraging them.
Yes, thank you. All right, so Chris, what about educating yourself? What are the ways in which people and students can get education, facts, truth? Those are the things that really matter, in terms of getting justice for these types of crimes.
Yeah, absolutely. I think programs like this is the start. I think that, the way to approach education is that one should never stop learning, that you always question the premise upon which your life has been sort of, like, society will tell you, this is you, this is your life, this is how you should be, this is what you should believe. As a citizen in this country, particularly if you're non-white, you need to question those premises. You need to understand the history. You need to read constantly. You need to criticize. You need to be self-reflective. And I think that these programs and Council for Unity helps encourage that. So I think that's wonderful. So I think that anyone that's here is doing the right thing, and they spread that virus, so to speak, that idea to always educate themselves, to always learn, to always break through conventional sort of modes of thinking, so that you can be a citizen and, and just do one thing in the city government, in your community, and that will lead to many other things. I think that's, just one small thing, you'll be surprised where it leads in terms of what kind of change it brings about.
Right, absolutely.
Regina, I just wanted to step in 1 second. I think that's really important in terms of education that Chris just mentioned. And I noted also that you saw there was a question from one of the students in terms of whether it was mandatory or whether it was automatic, and how hate crimes are prosecuted, et cetera. And it's really important that people understand exactly how it's prosecuted or not prosecuted, because the more information you have, the better you are armed in terms of how to deal with it. And so you know how to follow up on it. You know what you're talking about when you are reporting these incidents. You know whether it is, in fact, you can be considered a hate crime, whether it could be considered COVID-19, et cetera. So the more information you have and the more knowledge you have concerning the subject, I think it's very important. The other thing I wanted to mention is, as African Americans, and I think, I don't recall, I think Chris mentioned this as well, in terms of African American males now wearing masks and how it does create many issues. There was also a case recently where an African American professor, I don't know if you saw this, was driving with his 10-year-old son. I think it was outside of Rhode Island, and he was pulled over by two vehicles, and basically what they told him was, using the N-word, get out of here, you don't belong here, we don't want you in this area. And as I stated, he was a professor, and I believe he might have been a professor at Dartmouth, because it wasn't far from his location, but that's neither here nor there. He actually had a home there, which again did not matter, but he resisted the urge to escalate the situation, and he talked it down, and he was like, fine, no problem, we're leaving, etc. And he got into his vehicle with his son and drove back to their home, and he reported it. So it just, again, it shows that even in the most quote unquote normal situation where you're just driving down the road, not bothering anyone, because of these times, again, people feel that they can, that their inner bias and prejudices can come out at this time. And so you have to be very careful as an African American, as an Asian American, etc., not to give them any fodder in terms of escalating these situations, which becomes very, very difficult.
Yes, absolutely. Thank you. Thank you, everyone. All right, so we're going to open it up now for Q&A. If anyone has any questions, I believe Mary is going to unmute. So if anyone wants to chime in, one thing I want to do is I want to give a shout out to Tony Walters. I saw that he tuned in a while ago. Tony Walters is the head of the Court's Workforce Diversity Office. Thanks for joining in, Tony.
You're welcome, Nadine. Thank you.
So do you have any comments or questions? We're not just taking comments and questions from students. We're taking them from everyone.
No, great program. I'm glad. Thank you, Mary Lynn, for the invitation. And just hoping that the students will take some of the great words of counsel from this presentation to heart and will help them on their respective journeys.
Okay, thank you. Thank you so much. Well, if there are no questions, let's just have a final parting thought from each of our panel. Questions? Do I hear a question? Hello? All right. Well,
so I'm interested, Nadine, maybe we can ask if any of the students have ever encountered harassment or discrimination, and whether they identified with any of the videos or how, if they have any ideas in terms of making the world a better place so stuff like this doesn't happen.
Sure. I see Alex. Alex is in the chat. How can I chime in? Alex, are you on a call or are you seeing the video? If you're seeing the video, you can unmute yourself and chime in.
So Alex, if you see something that looks like a microphone, it might be on the bottom of your screen or somewhere else. You hit the mic, there's like a strike sign on it, striking the microphone. If you unmute yourself, we should be able to hear you. Yeah, I see that you've unmuted yourself. So we should be able to hear you. Why don't you start talking to us? Thank you.
No, tap your mic. Yeah, one more time.
Yeah. To your, whether it be computer or your telephone, just bring it closer to you and then speak to us.
Got it. I got it. Got it. Do I?
Hey.
Oh, I'm here. Kyle, I'll talk to you later.
Welcome, Alex.
Oh my goodness gracious. I am filled with tears. They're tears of kind of sadness, but the joy that I feel has way overcome the sadness that I have listening and watching everybody talking. And I want to see the reaction of the kids watching, because that's what it's all about. They're our future, and they're the future of the planet. And what we have, we just want to share the peace, love, and happiness in black and white together that we had in the 60s, and every color together. And I can't believe, I'm like, I don't mean to sound silly or insecure, but or uninvolved, but I can't believe that things are happening like this today. Maybe my eyes are closed or my heart's not open enough, but I can't believe that there's the amount of hate going on, because all I want is to have love going on, and I want to be able to do something to make it happen, and I want to do it together, and I need somebody to guide me. I'm sorry. I'm just very teary and overwhelmed because this
No.
is beautiful.
Yeah. Yeah. Yes, Alex, you're right. It's an overwhelming time for so many reasons. And to have this issue on top of it all, it really is mind-boggling that here we are in the 21st century, dealing with the same issues that we've dealt with, 100 years ago.
Well, seems like it, right?
Yeah. So, the solutions that we've talked about, education, supporting the victims, joining forces with allies from groups, creating diverse coalitions, doing something, standing aside, taking a video, reporting. Reporting is extremely important, as Justice Lee Cohan and Justice Weber talked about, because if the police and the authorities don't know that these things are happening, they have no way to deal with it. I know some people don't want to do it, but it really, if you are the friend or family member of someone who's encountered something like that, they really need to be supported and encouraged to do that, because there are so many institutions today and organizations today that are supportive of such, whereas years ago there were not such supportive institutions.
I understand about reporting it, but how about just making it not happen so much? I feel like I need to move back into Manhattan and walk around and just give everybody a peace sign and hug everybody walking down the street. What is it that we can do to make this happen less often? We need people like Kyle and Gary Kay to walk around the street too and just share love.
Yes, that is a solution. And like Chris talked about, education is extremely important. And other solutions, there are lots of other more acceptable alternative solutions, car rallies, petitions, Twitter storms, writing letters and articles, email, phone calls, other social media posts to counteract these instances of xenophobia, bias.
Even a post, when you see an article about somebody being attacked or racially profiled, just sending it around and say, this is just not acceptable. It's not acceptable. And just to make other people aware that it's happening and that there is societal disapproval. So, your friends will say, oh, Alex is upset about this. Oh, I didn't even know about this. So it's a way of educating people. I mean, we all have a role that we can educate people. There are people, you're not in perhaps the Asian American community. This is happening. It happened to my daughter. It happened to so many Asian Americans that I know of. And I once, actually many years ago, taught a college course, and I had each one of the students do a diary of racism, of things that they've encountered during the day. And it was shocking to me. And I think, I'm somebody who's very sensitive, that how people felt they were being treated. And so we all are in our own bubble, and sometimes we don't understand how other people are being treated. That's a way of educating people. And that's a big piece of it, is educating others and saying, look, and also saying it's not right. This is not right how this person was being treated. For example, I had a student who recounted how she walked into a diner and she was the only African American, and a young woman, and she felt everybody stared at her and they didn't rush to give her a menu, whereas other people sat down after her and got a menu. And it was something that she encountered on a daily basis. And I think that's something that other people may not realize that it's happening. And so our role can be to kind of open people's eyes.
Could I tell you how I would like to do it?
Sure.
I want to have big parties, get-togethers with all of our friends and have a good time and a lot of fun and take a lot of pictures and share the pictures to show everybody that we are together. We're not apart. There's no reason for us not to be together. And there's only the reason for us to be. Hey, listen, I'm a Jew from Queens. I grew up on Chinese food. I cannot do without Chinese food. So what the heck is that? My friends that I played ball with were my black friends that they bust in the 5th grade. And they're still my friends. How is that not still happening today? We need to reinvent that and make it happen more.
Alex, that's a great idea. And as a matter of fact, Dr. Betty Campbell, I hope she's going to chime in. She says in the chat, having this discussion is about, hey there, how you doing? Chime in.
I'm well, wonderful program. And I just wanted to chime in. And, Alex asked a very important question in terms of, how do we begin to do this work? And I think it's important for us to just begin engaging in the dialogue. Sometimes, to be able to talk to friends, colleagues, or those who are maybe outside of our circle about what's going on in and outside of our communities. I mean, sometimes, we fail to realize what other people are going through. And someone made mention earlier about, the victimization and the traumatization that goes into when you're dealing with hate, and the importance of communicating to victims that it is okay to speak out, but also being advocates and bringing these discussions to the forefront, and thinking about it collectively and globally about how do we go forward, and just informing people and supporting those who have been victimized by hate and racism.
Yes, absolutely. So Dr. Betty, Jay Jacobs also said, maybe we can start campaigns for love, equity, and or equality in the form of buttons and T-shirts, and he loves the diary idea that Justice Lee Cohan mentioned.
Good afternoon.
Jay Jacobs?
Yes, ma'am. How are you? And thank you for this. Thank you for everybody that shared. I was thinking specifically as it relates to social media, because we aren't out. We're quarantined technically right now, so we're mostly online. And I've seen and heard some people really post some poignant stuff regarding all of this. One Caucasian young lady posted an apology towards all people of color, just for all the injustices forever that have occurred in this country since this, establishment. And I noticed that sometimes people will write inappropriate racist slurs or comments right in the box. How can these people be held accountable as like hate crimes for something like this? I think that's a space that we can defend someone in that, but it kind of goes like a ping pong back and forth, and nobody's really being held accountable for it taking place right online in front of us.
You're not oh, darling, my girl.
Okay.
Listen, we're plan parties. We are going to be planning parties. Kyle and Gary and I are going to plan parties at my place, and we're all invited, and we're going to talk about all this stuff.
All right. So Jay Jacobs made an interesting point about commentary on social media, but now Justice Weber, we know that just mere commentary may not necessarily translate into actual crime. But how do we? Yeah.
No, it doesn't, because of that, that First Amendment thing there. So it wouldn't translate into an actual crime. However, he makes an interesting point, and this is one of the issues that we have, is because that type of speech and those types of comments then lead to some others to then take action. And so that's where you have to really be careful, because, the argument is, well, it's free speech, but individuals then take that and they run with it, and then they commit crimes based upon what they see on social media. And so that's an ongoing issue.
Right. The other thing is, if it's on Facebook, is that you actually can report. Sometimes these groups are have rules, and the person who's posting has broken a rule of profanity or racism or something like that. You can actually click and you'll see report to the administrator, report to Facebook. So you can do that as well. And you can also
but it tends to be directed at specific groups, and so the individuals that would see it are not going to actually complain about it. But every once in a while you will see something. I'll get a stray message, that'll say something. But for the most part, it's kind of targeted to a specific group, and those are the ones who are getting it. And yeah, you definitely can report it to the administrator if they're using profanity. But if they're just saying certain things, like this came from the Chinese, or this is the Chinese flu or something like that, they're not going to necessarily take that down. And if you recall, Trump Jr. Tweeted something like that, and there was this whole issue as to whether Twitter should have allowed it or should not have allowed it. And basically it was, they should have allowed it. There's a student, Alicia, she has can share an experience. Nadine, do you see that?
Alicia, yes. Alicia, please chime in. Can you?
Hi, can you guys see me?
Yeah,
okay.
I can hear you.
Oh, okay.
Yes.
Well, I mean, I'm Hispanic. I'm Dominican and Puerto Rican. So, and
hi there. We see you now.
Hi.
Hi.
Okay, so I have a couple of experiences with racism and being biased towards Hispanics and stuff. But I remember one time, I used to live in Brooklyn, so it was kind of like I was always kind of seeing a lot of people not being the nicest to other people of color. So I remember I moved to a predominantly white neighborhood, and it was like the first time that I went to the supermarket with my mom. And it was like a lot of mostly the people that worked there were white, and me and my mom, we were just grocery shopping, and the entire time that we were shopping, someone was following us, and at first we didn't think anything of it, and we were like, oh, okay, this is weird, but maybe they recognize us from somewhere or something like that. And the more we kept shopping and just looking around for stuff, they just kept following. And then we saw the badge that they were a worker there. And we turned around and we were like, what the hell? And then we heard one of the people whisper oh, just keep an eye on them. And, we bought our stuff and we left, and we were that was just blatant racism. There was just no need. It was just a mother and her daughter shopping. There was no need to look at us a certain way.
Yeah.
Yeah, and then studies show that while they're following you, there's somebody else who is maybe looks more like them who are doing all the stealing. There are tons of studies that talk about that. They're following you, they're following the African American, they're following, the Dominican, etc. But it's actually the white one who's stuffing all the merchandise in their bags and under their clothing, and they're getting away free because they targeted you, and they thought that it's profiling, because they figure, oh, if you're of color, you're going to be stealing. And doesn't that make you feel really demoralized?
Yeah, when I was younger, I never really experienced anything like that. You know what I mean? I went to a school that was just predominantly African American and Hispanic. So it was we were all we're just all here,
And then it's why should I give them my money? You know what? If they're going to treat me like that, then why should I go back to that store?
Yeah, me and my mom never went back there. And then one time my mom, she went back to the store, and there was an African American woman that was the cashier, and she was like, oh, hi, sweetheart, this and that, how are you? And, my mom was just they were just chit-chatting or whatever. And she was on the phone with me while she was talking to her, and she was like, oh, it's kind of late outside, because it was just really dark outside. She's like, yeah, I just came from work, I'm a social worker. And the lady was like, oh, that's really nice. And my mom told me that all of the people around her looked at her like she had 4 heads. I was like,
you're
wow.
a social worker? How's that possible?
I was like, wow,
yeah, you're not a social worker. Yeah.
So Alicia, so in any of the videos, did you identify with any of the people who told their stories? given
Wait,
our
I would like
own.
to share a story.
I mean,
I'm another student.
Hi.
Hi, my name is Marilise. I'm a part of Council for Unity as well. I haven't been talking because I've been trying to find a way to unmute myself.
Oh, we can hear you now.
Yeah, okay.
This is going to be the last question or comment.
So I wanted to comment about the violence with the Asian Americans. I'm not Asian, I'm Dominican, but I have a friend that is Asian. And before the whole quarantine started, when like the coronavirus was starting to get around, my friend, she goes to a different school. She actually had to leave school early because so many people inside her school was threatening to assault her when school finishes, just because she was Asian and because of the coronavirus. And the only way she got out there safely is that one student that I believe was either white or Hispanic, one of those two, I forgot. She came up to my friend and warned her about it and helped her leave early from the back of the school and not in the front, since almost half of the school was waiting for her in the front just to assault her.
And as a result of that, what happened? What happened? Did anyone report it? Did anyone videotape it or anything? Do you know?
Everybody was waiting with their phones to record the assault, but my friend was able to call her parents, and they were able to pick her up early, bring her home. But it was very traumatic for both of them because she's a friend of another friend of mine, and she told that friend of mine, and that friend of mine told me, and we were just like, how could somebody ever choose to do that to a certain individual because of their own race? That's absurd. And how such a large group of people were willing just to record that injustice just for entertainment, basically. That was very absurd in my opinion.
Right. No, you're absolutely right. You have to be strong. I mean, and it goes to bullying. You know, it's a part of, there's general bullying, you know, kids of the same race or ethnicity, you know, bullying. I was a target of bullying when I was at school. You know, it's traumatic. It is terrible to have a group of kids follow you, you know. In my situation, I guess it was a little different because, you know, you're, you know, the smart kid, the kid that looks a certain way or whatever, and other kids either don't like you or, you know, because you're not joining in with maybe some of the bad things that kids are doing. But it takes a strong person to stand up and say, no, this is not right. It takes a strong person, a friend or someone to try to usher that person out. Thank God your friend had her parents come and come early and get her out of there. But we hear far too many stories about this. And again, that's probably not something that would translate to a crime. All right. However, something like that can have devastating effects, as we all know. You know, people who are the subject of such traumatic bullying that they end up taking their lives and all of that sort of thing. And we want to do everything that we can as allies of people and just generally good people, as just Doris Lane Cohan said, be a force for good. So we want to do everything that we can to ameliorate these types of situations when we see them. I can't tell you how many times I've encountered different things along the street and the subways, and I've said something about, but you also have to be careful, because in the society that we live in, people are on the edge. You don't know where folks are coming from. You don't know if there's a mental history going on or something like that. So you do have to be careful. You have to be concerned about yourself as well. And if anything, you have to stand to the side. Don't get in the way of police doing their business. You know, we see lots of incidents of police activity on the street in this pandemic, with social distancing and trying to break up groups of people
Right. In terms of that particular incident, though, I think that it could be, we don't know. I mean, it could have escalated if she had walked in. Certainly the police, if they had called, could have broken up that crowd and said, you know, what are you standing here for? And then somebody, well, you know, waiting for somebody to come out. I mean, it could have been handled perhaps another way. I'm glad the friend stood up and helped the young woman out of the school. But certainly it could have escalated into a crime, and it could have been something which the police could have interjected.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, thank you for sharing.
Yes, thank you. Thank you for sharing.
I just want
It's
to say
very
one last
disturbing.
thing. One last thing in terms of videotaping. There were a couple of cases a year or so ago with individuals who were videotaping the police officers making an arrest, etc., and they too were arrested. The case law is pretty clear that you can videotape police officers doing whatever they're doing, so long as you maintain a quote-unquote safe distance from them, and so long as you're not interfering in any way with the arrest. So it's not like you can get right behind them and videotape what's going on, but so long as you maintain a distance from them so that you're not interfering, you can videotape their actions.
Okay. Well, on that note, we will end. Thank you everyone for joining in. This has been a fantastic program. Thank you for all of your comments and sharing and great ideas. And please go out and continue these discussions amongst yourself, your peers, and others. And we will see you next time with another engaging, wonderful program. Thank you to Justice Weber, Justice Lynn Cohan, and Chris Kwok for their wonderful contributions. Thank you, Mary and Carlene, and everyone. Thank you so much.
Lashaya, Kyle, and Nadine. Nadine Johnson.
Kyle and Lashaya. Yes, and all of the Council for Unity folks who have chimed in. And of course, to our wonderful, fantastic Bob DeSena. We wish him well, and thank you, everyone.
Peace, love, and happiness.
Thank you so much.
Have a wonderful weekend.
Wow. Wow.
Thank you.
Wow. Wow. Wow.
Thank you, Alex.
Good evening, everyone. So thank you again. We're going to close out the meeting, and we have a recording, and we'll be able to share that later. Thank you, Judge Lynn Cohan. Thank you, Nadine. Wonderful day, Judge Lynn Cohan. And Nadine, have a wonderful evening. Thank you.